Today is December 15th, middle of December-ish. It's the middle of the day on the 15th. So I feel like that's kind of the middle. You just call it the middle of December. And these office hours are a chance to connect with me and talk a little bit about December training, December planning. What are the key elements that we want to focus on as we head into not only the end of the season, but also with an eye towards of next season as well. And so there's a couple of things that I always have to talk about this time of year, and I'll run through them here in office hours. And as always, if you have questions or anything else, you can stick around at the end and ask them or shoot me a message on the site. Big things for me that come up at the end of the season, I'm always asking athletes three key questions, right? So number one is, how would you rate this past year? I think it's really important that we spend time developing the cognitive, process, if you will, that allows you to go back and sort of rate your performance as objectively as you possibly can. Most people, they find it hard to be objective about their own results. But I do want to make sure that people kind of get a sense of, this was a success or this was not a success. Like, where was I? What worked? What didn't work, essentially. Give yourself a score based off of that. Some people use letters, some people use numbers, some people use emojis, whatever that is. But we want to have a good sense of how the year wrapped up for you. And obviously, 2020 being what it was, there's going to be a lot of sort of additional, or like at the bottom of your survey, a lot of other comments that are going to fit in there, which is fine. Put them in there, but we still want to rate your performance. And you can look at numbers in terms of distance run or swam or biked or time trained, or more benchmark numbers like your threshold pace, threshold power, number of days that you slept more than 10 hours or whatever that may be. Whatever your key metrics are, we want to know what those numbers are, and we want them to be part of that assessment. But at the end of the day, we're looking for sort of a general assessment of the year, right? The next piece that we want to focus on is saying, well, what is my objectives for next year, given that first point? So if I just said to you, hey, what do you want to do this year? You may come up with any sort of idea. You may say, I want to ride my bike, all the way across Europe, right? But when we start the conversation from how did last year wrap, that kind of infuses the decision of that next piece to make it a little more connected to the recent past, and more of a stepping stone. And as a coach, I'm always looking for those stepping stones. I don't like when people, talk about a point. Like, one time I ran a marathon and I was this fast. Now I want to run a marathon and I'm this fast. And I have no way of knowing what happens between those 2 points. It could be 3 months, it could be 3 years, it could be 13 years. A lot changes in that delta. And so having conversations where we don't have some kind of delineation to the time becomes really challenging, because the time allows me to know the depth of the effect, right? So if it's been 3 months since the marathon, that depth of change is X, right? If it's been 3 years since that marathon, that depth of change is like 30X, right? And if it's been 13 years, like 300X. So that timeline does matter. So that first question really, in a way, not only capturing last year, but also setting up the next question, which is, what are your goals? And having goals that are based off of what this year is. 2020, I think, is going to be lingering with us for a while. And so from that perspective, connecting it forward is fairly straightforward. But as we still want to be mindful in terms of setting our goals, understanding where we've come from. I often say that past performance is the best predictor of future performance. And in many ways, past training is also a great predictor of future training. You may want to ride your bike 400 miles in a couple of weeks, but if you've only been riding it for 100 miles or 50 miles for the last couple of weeks, that's something that we need to solve intentionally. We can't just have you go wing it. You can't just go do it. There's a difference there, right? So contextually basing future goals, even within the context of the next year, off of recent training, performance, and also just general overall emotional state, I think is really, really helpful, right? And then 3, the last part of that equation is talking about opportunities. This is my favorite part of the conversation. I know that I've always said I've never met a constraint that I didn't like, but at the end of the day, it's not just about constraints. There's also opportunities, right? So when one door closes, another door opens. I think about this a lot when we talk about challenges that people have with their schedule. A great hypothetical example would be someone who's on more of a flex schedule. They'll work 3 days on, 14-hour shifts or 18-hour shifts, and then they have 4 days off. Most of those athletes will look at that and say, I just can't be like all my friends. I can't train the way that normal people do because I've got this block of time where I can't be training, and then I have this other block of time. I like to flip that equation and say, wow, we've got 4 days to work with here. I know we can't train all 4 days, but what does that look like? So don't look like it as this is an obstacle on our path, but rather say, what are the opportunities that we have here? Similarly speaking, for athletes who perhaps have more mundane challenges related to, say like never being able to get their run over a certain distance, or living in a place where just getting outside for a couple months a year is like prohibitive to your health in general. Forget the virus, the pandemic. Just it's so cold where you live that it's just not going to happen. And so when we think about these different elements, where are the opportunities? And I really, really like to have you, the athlete, speak to me about the opportunities you see. This is an opportunity for us as coach and athlete to interface and for me to understand more where you come from, right? So I will see opportunities from the data that you submit, from the training that you've done, from the racing that you've done, and sort of the consistency that you put into your year. I see opportunity from that. But I don't appreciate the work that you've done, whether it was, just fortuitous you got it done, or it was a lot of hard work for you, until you start telling me about the opportunities you see. Not that your opportunities are the be all end all, but for me, they're that first insight as to what way you are approaching the problem. So for example, if someone has a problem with run mileage, and they say, hey, every time I get to, more than 20 miles a week, things fall off, but I really want to do this 50K race, or I really want to do a marathon, and I need to be able to run at least 18 miles in one go to get it done, but I can't get to 20 miles in a week. How am I going to do this? Like, I don't understand what I'm going to do. And when I ask athletes in that situation, what are the opportunities that they have? Some particular athlete might say something on the lines of, well, I can, schedule a massage, or body work more frequently in that time frame, right? Or I can pre-schedule my physical therapy appointments because things are going to go wrong. But there's other ways to look at that from an opportunity perspective, right? Let's break it all down. Let's find out, is it a frequency thing, right? Is it running? You run too long on days that are too close, or you're running on back-to-back days. Is there an opportunity here to change your training structure from one that's intensity focused to one that's more endurance focused, right? So we take away a lot of the intensity and build frequency and durability as a part of your training goal, right? Like all training raises fitness. It depends on what your goals are and how much training you can do, but the healthier you are, the more training we get. So anything that helps me get you more training, the more likely I am to be excited about that, right? So that's another option, is to say, how else would you look at this issue, right? There's other ways I would look at it. Like, I'd want to know about your running shoes choice. I'd want to know about the terrain that you run on. I want to know about the time of day that you run. I want to know what else you do at work. It's quite possible that you're on your feet all day. So having an opportunity to run or to take breaks after you run may actually be sort of a proactive step that could be really helpful for you. Right now, I'm sitting here at my standing desk. I'm sitting down now for the video, but I do a fair amount of standing as well. And I found that gives me a great deal more resiliency with my running than when I don't do that, right? So creating conditions for success, the opportunities that exist there, the mind meld, if you will, for total geekiness. There's an opportunity to connect the opportunities you see with what I see. And then let's not forget that other component, which is the team. As much as this you're willing to share out in the community, whether it's our chat or in the actual community space, we learn a great deal more about what our opportunities are, and what actually we can sort of dive into just by tapping into the collective experience of everyone on the team, which I think is really helpful. So to recap there, when we think about what this transition piece looks like for us at the end of the year, it's a combination of rating last year. It's a combination of using that information to define what our goals are for the upcoming season, and then having a conversation about all the opportunities that we have, framing those challenges as opportunities, and what does that look like. I talked with one of our members just the other week about his training. He's recently retired. He's super excited. But after the conversation, it just became clear to me that relative to the amount of work we want to do and he's capable of doing, and the schedule that he has at his disposal, we actually want to put one of our minimalist plans into his account. Well, a minimalist plan is the typical plan that someone who's super busy would use. And this person's retired and we're giving him less training, but I think it's going to yield a better result. And that only comes out of having more detailed conversations and starting this conversation from an authentic place, a space where you've had an opportunity to kind of really digest what the year has been, use that to frame forward, and then we start talking about those opportunities. So for me, those are the big things. Now, when we move beyond that, sort of the fundamental building blocks of this transition period, as an individual athlete, if I could take my coach hat off for a second and talk to you, I also think that we have an opportunity to rebuild some of our specific habits as we head into a new year. People just arbitrarily choose the new year as this milestone for bringing something new. When I think about what it means to move from